The decision to fire Mike Munchak as head coach last year was, to me, a surprising one for the Tennessee Titans. Look, I understand they felt Mariota had a bad season. Ultimately, you ride or die based off of the success of the guy that you once took number 2 overall in that 2015 draft. I get it. That's the investment that matters the most. Especially as you're getting closer and closer to the end of that rookie contract, you need to figure out if you're going to commit massive money to this guy long term. I understand, and I get it. But still, ultimately, the Titans, in spite of Mariota's lackluster season, were able to get into the playoffs and then had that miraculous second half comeback in the wild card round on the road against the Chiefs. Yeah, the guy had a winning record. You made it to the playoffs. You won a playoff game. Feels awkward to fire a head coach because of that. Like, as a general rule, you would feel like you want to reward success, not punish it. But the Titans felt like they could do more, they could get more out of what they had, and that they needed to do so. And ultimately fired Mike Munchak and hired Mike Vrabel away from the Texans. Okay, going down that kind of Andy Reid coaching tree, if you will, that Bill O'Brien coaching tree, which means there are roots to Bill Belichick. And again, why the fuck would you want to be a part of that Bill Belichick coaching tree? Whatever the case might be. But clearly the Tennessee Titans felt like they needed to make a change because they didn't feel they were that far away or whatever the case might be. Maybe most of all, they were worried about they were going to lose out ultimately on their investment in Mariota. I'm not really sure. It could be a variety of those factors. But this team went into the offseason, spent big money to bring in Malcolm Butler, brought in Dion Lewis. Here's maybe another thing that should concern some people in the NFL. If Belichick doesn't want a player anymore, maybe you shouldn't pay him big money. The Giants, I think, found that out with Nate Solder. Maybe the Titans found that out with Malcolm Butler. Just a thought, and now it's not to say anybody's perfect or that Bill Belichick's been perfect in terms of his personnel decisions, because he most certainly has not been. But at some point in time, to the guy that has now won 6 Super Bowls, led his team to 10 Super Bowl appearances, at some particular point, you would sit there and say to yourself, 9 Super Bowl appearances, whatever the fuck. There's so many, it's hard to keep track anymore. You would think you would say to yourself, if he doesn't want him, why would I? Just a thought. Just a thought. But as you watch the Titans this year, they were a really frustrating team. Very, very frustrating. Because you didn't know really to me from one week to the next what the fuck you were going to get out of them. You just did it. Like week 2, they beat Houston, which at the beginning of the season didn't look like much, but ultimately we found out beating Houston was a pretty big deal. The week 4 victory over Philly, going forward on 4th down and those types of decisions. And you're like, okay, maybe this team has something. Maybe this team can do it. Then they go and they come back off of their bye a little bit later, and you have back-to-back dominant, impressive performances over the Cowboys and the Patriots, both playoff teams, and the Patriots ended up winning the Super Bowl. If you go back to that particular game, it's crazy. You think about the AFC South opponents the Patriots face, and you say to yourself, the Jaguars smoked them and the Titans smoked them, yet the fucking Patriots are Super Bowl champs, and the Titans and Jags both missed the damn playoffs. The hell? You had the back-to-back losses against Indy and Houston. Just a yo-yo-ish kind of season where you saw them some weeks and you're like, man, this team could really be something. Then you had other games and you're like, whoa, what the hell are they supposed to be? They won their first 4 games in December, which put them right in the mix of saying, basically, week 17, it's all on the line, even with some of the injuries to Mariota and having to go with Blaine Gabbert and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If you serve at home against the Colts, week 17, Sunday night, win and you're in. And once you get to the dance, anything can happen, as you found out last year. And they go out there and lay a freaking egg. The Colts beat them good, and the Titans were able to watch the playoffs just like me at home. And what's really bad about that is you had that 3-game stretch there in the season of losses. Buffalo, Baltimore, the Chargers, where they only scored 29 points combined on offense. It's one thing. The Ravens and Chargers are good teams, good defenses. Buffalo had a really good defense, but those 3 games, you average less than 10 points a game. 29 points in 3 games. That's what I'm talking about, the kind of yo-yo season that I saw the Titans have this year. And especially week 17. And to me, I really wonder, is that the beginning of the end for Mariota in Tennessee? Because, man, oh man, do I have a really hard time sitting there and defending somebody. I put it this way. If there's even a question whether or not the guy is going to be able to play, and he's the freaking quarterback, and you're getting into a game where literally your season is on the line, he must play. At least give it a shot. To me, those are the types of things, especially when you're talking about the quarterback position. You could talk about long-term wanting to protect yourself, long-term wanting to make sure you don't get a major injury. I get all of that. But from a locker room standpoint, from a visibility standpoint, from a branding standpoint, to me, this had to be incredibly detrimental to Mariota and the perception that he has in that Titans locker room. Because when this team really needed him, knowing you're going into the biggest game of your season with Blaine fucking Gabbert otherwise, you would think you would want Mariota to at least try to go out there. And if it was so obvious early on that he was ineffective and that he was going to do the team more harm than good, then so be it. You pull him, and then Blaine Gabbert comes in, you still get your ass kicked anyways. Like, if I was on that team, I would seriously have doubts and reservations about the leadership, the desire, the heart, the want to about Marcus Mariota. Fair or not, that to me would be the perception, which then makes it the reality. Which is a shame because Derrick Henry had a really good season, over 1,000 yards, almost 5 yards a carry. Corey Davis started to show some signs of life, 65 catches, almost 900 yards. You know, he started to play in flashes like a number one type of wide receiver. But Mariota had another mediocre year again. You throw in missing some action due to injuries and then not being there in Week 17 when your team needed you the most. That's hard to come back from. That's really, really hard to come back from, which is a shame because his defense for this team was really good this year. Top 10 against the pass, top 10 in total yards allowed. Jarrell Casey's still a fucking stallion, one of the best players in the league that nobody ever talks about. And lo and behold, they failed to make the playoffs. That's how it goes. Now, when you look to this offseason for the Titans, it's really hard to know what to say. Like, you get Brian Orakpo announced his retirement already. His team has about $40 million in cap space. Not a lot of notable free agents, maybe like a Derek Morgan and Benny Logan. But guys, okay, if you resign them, great, but you're not going to break the bank to do it. And if you lose them, it's not exactly the biggest deal. But you're like, okay, where do you go in free agency? Where do you spend that money that you have? Do you go overpay for an edge guy? Because you feel like you need another difference maker defensively? You know, I don't know. And even if you do some of these things and you spend some of that money that you have available under the cap, ultimately, if Mariota's not that dude, none of this shit matters one lick. Not one lick. When you look at this draft class, it was clear they were looking for some guys that could make some impact. They drafted Rashaan Evans in round 1, Harold Landry in round 2. You got Cruikshank a little bit later on day 3, but that was about it. It was about quality of draft class for them, not quantity. And I think you look at Evans and Landry, probably their best football is still ahead of them. I wouldn't say they were superstars or anything, but they definitely had their moments. But again, it doesn't really matter. Heading into this offseason, what can they address? I still feel like offensive line, especially the interior of that line, could be addressed. Tight end, Delaney Walker, you would assume, is probably on his way out the door. What do you have there that you really have confidence in? I still feel like you probably use another wide receiver opposite Corey Davis. Defensively, I feel like you use some help on that front seven for sure. I look at it as much as anything else. The Titans could probably use another impact player or two. They have the cap space to bring in one true difference-making impact type of player in this offseason and probably need to do so. And hopefully for their case, they can draft at least one, if not two, potential difference makers, impact players, because they need to. That is, it all comes back to, and what is effectively Marcus Mariota's contract season. If he's not going to be that dude, and this team doesn't get behind him, and he can't play at a higher level, all of this shit isn't going to matter. And if you're a Titans fan, you're going to feel like you're going right back to where you were at several years back with no identity and no real positive hopes for the future.